Shedeur Sanders didn't play like a rookie in his first NFL start, and that's exactly what stunned Ross Tucker. Despite having barely any first-team reps during training camp or the preseason, Sanders delivered performance packed with confidence, movement, and accuracy. His pocket presence was clean. His decision-making looked rehearsed. And for someone the Browns had essentially kept on the sidelines, he showed the kind of polish that teams hope for after years, not days. According to Tucker, that polish didn't come from long-term prep. It came from 1 week of serious.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Folder not found. Create new folder. Ross Tucker. That contrast, the months of neglect versus the 1 week breakthrough, exposes a coaching decision that Tucker believes set Sanders back unnecessarily. The Browns had potential franchise quarterbacks sitting in plain sight, but their strategy or lack thereof delayed his development and limited their own options. Now that Sanders has shown what he can do, the story shifts to whether Cleveland will stop dragging their feet and actually invest in his growth moving forward. Ross Tucker just set off a firestorm, and the Cleveland Browns are squarely in the blast radius. KS, in one of the most pointed, no-nonsense takedowns a year, the former NFL offensive lineman and CBS analyst did not hold back. The target? Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski and his staff, for what Tucker called a complete mishandling of rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders. And to be honest, he's not wrong. Not even, according to Tucker, this isn't just about a delayed debut. It's about a coaching failure. It's about how a team can spend 6 months ignoring the development of a young quarterback with franchise potential, only to turn around and fix his most obvious weakness, pocket bailing. In 7 days of actual, intentional coaching. 7 days. And that's the part that really cuts through the noise. Shedeur didn't need a miracle. He needed attention. He needed structured reps with the first team. He needed to be prioritized. But for half a year, he was left out of the equation. No meaningful snaps. No game plan built for him. Just a holding pattern, while the Browns tried to figure things out with quarterbacks who weren't getting the job done. And then, out of necessity, not foresight, they put Sanders in. And his first NFL start, he played like a seasoned pro. Tucker emphasized what most of us saw: composure, pocket presence, high-level decision-making, and arm talent that absolutely jumped off the screen. It wasn't some scrappy, just hang in there rookie performance. It was controlled. It was intentional. It was impressive. That's what makes the coaching staff approach even harder to defend. Because it means Shedeur didn't just figure it out overnight. He was ready. Or at the very least, he was ready to start getting ready a long time ago. So why didn't they act on it? Ross Tucker isn't by any excuses. And honestly, neither should anyone else. This isn't just a timeline issue. It's a philosophy problem. The Browns had a quarterback who demonstrated growth, leadership, and maturity, and they left him sitting for 6 months. And the worst part? They actually had the tools to develop him the whole time. They knew about the pocket bailing issue. They understood it was something that could be coached. And when they finally gave him a week of preparation, the results were immediate. That says more about the Browns' developmental process than anything else. It says they're reactive, not proactive. It says they didn't trust what they had until they were out of other options. And now that Shedeur has proved them wrong, they're trying to pivot as if this was a plan all along. Spoiler, it wasn't. This kind of decision-making matters, because in the NFL, you don't get 6-month mulligans. Those missed reps in camp and early season games, you don't get those back. That lost time building chemistry with the starters, that doesn't just magically show up later. Quarterback development is fragile. It's built on consistency, on trust, on repetition. And what Tucker's pointing out, what he's really mad about, is that the Browns had every chance to nurture Sanders earlier, and they waited. They hesitated. They second-guessed a player who's now making their entire process look foolish. Tucker praised Shedeur's mental toughness and work ethic, which is important here. Because if Sanders wasn't built the way he is, if he didn't have the discipline, the patience, the leadership skills, this entire situation could have gone sideways. Easily. He could have fallen behind, lost confidence, been labeled not ready. But that didn't happen. And not because the Browns set him up to succeed. He succeeded in spite of how he was handled. Let that sink in. Sanders didn't just have a good first outing. He had a remarkable one given the circumstances. No real starting experience, limited first-team practice, minimal game planning tailored to his strengths. And still, he walked out and controlled the game like it was his job from the beginning. So yeah, Ross Tucker is fed up, and he should be. He's calling out a pattern in the NFL where coaches say one thing about developing young talent, but then fall back on safe, stale habits when it's time to make a decision. They talk about upside and leadership and long-term value, but then bury that potential under wait-your-turn mentalities that do more harm than good. Tucker doesn't see this as a one-off. He sees it as a missed opportunity that should never have happened in the first place. If a quarterback's biggest flaw can be corrected in 7 days, what does it say about the other 180? It says they didn't try. And now the Browns are in a weird spot, because if Shedeur keeps performing, the entire narrative around this season shifts. Suddenly, people aren't just looking at the future with hope, they're looking at the past with frustration. What could Sanders have accomplished if he'd been given a fair shot earlier? What kind of rhythm and confidence might he already have? How many wins could the Browns have pulled out with a more dynamic, prepared quarterback leading the huddle? There's no undoing that delay, but it should at least spark some reflection inside the Browns facility. Kevin Stefanski and his staff need to look in the mirror and ask themselves how they missed this, how they failed to recognize the signs. Because Shedeur wasn't hiding. He was working, quietly, consistently, professionally, and they didn't notice until they ran out of other choices. Tucker's commentary isn't just about calling out Stefanski. It's about holding teams accountable for how they handle their most valuable asset. Young quarterbacks with the potential to reshape a franchise. If Sanders keeps growing, and all signs say he will, then this rookie season becomes a case study, not just in resilience, but in how not to handle early development. Let's be clear, Shedeur Sanders deserves every ounce of credit here. He stayed locked in, stayed ready, stayed professional. But none of that justifies the delay. The Browns didn't develop him. He developed himself until they were forced to take notice. And now, they better not waste another second. If there's any lesson to take away from this mess, it's that talent doesn't wait forever. Teams either meet the moment or they miss it. Thankfully for the Browns, Shedeur was still ready when they finally did. But don't let that erase what came before. Don't let the solid start to distract from the fact that this could have happened much sooner, under much better circumstances. If the coaching staff had recognized what they had when they had it, that's a reality Ross Tucker put on blast. And honestly, he's doing the league a favor. So what do you think? Was this just cautious coaching, or a total misfire from Stefanski and the Browns? Should Shedeur Sanders have been starting since week 1? Or was this timing unavoidable? Drop your take in the comments. Like the video if you're tired of teams wasting young QB talent. And share this with someone who still thinks waiting is a development strategy. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time another team fumbles the bag. Because in this league, it's only a matter of time. Let's not sugarcoat it. This whole Shedeur Sanders situation has become a full-blown indictment of the Browns' quarterback development process. And Ross Tucker? He's just the latest and loudest to say the quiet part out loud. You don't have to be a former NFL player to see what's gone wrong here. But when a respected analyst like Tucker spells it out so bluntly, when he says the Browns wasted half a year, not giving their most promising rookie real reps, it hits different. It's not hot take noise. It's accountability. It's a mirror held up to a team that got it wrong. And the most frustrating part, it's not that Shedeur had to wait. It's that his biggest flaw, the one everyone talked about, the one the Browns supposedly needed time to help him fix, got handled in 7 days. 7. 1 week of actual preparation. And the problem that supposedly kept him on the bench? Gone. Do you understand how ridiculous that makes the entire last 6 months look? They weren't protecting him. They weren't grooming him. They were ignoring him. And then when they were forced to play him, he showed exactly what he could have been doing all along. Standing tall in the pocket, making smart reads, throwing with precision, and leading like he'd been the guy since day one. Ross Tucker saw what everyone watching that game saw. This wasn't just a decent debut. This was a statement. Shedeur Sanders looked like someone who had outgrown the clipboard weeks ago. Someone who had already been preparing for this moment behind the scenes, even if the coaching staff wasn't preparing for him. And that disconnect, that's where the real problem is. Because how does a team, a staff, a franchise, especially this franchise, miss something like that? The Browns aren't strangers to quarterback chaos. They've been trying to find stability at the position for 2 decades. Dozens of names. Dozens of failed experiments. So when you finally draft a guy with poise, maturity, and natural leadership, you'd think you'd move fast to get him going. But they didn't. Instead, they treated Sanders like a long-term project. A guy who might be ready eventually. Meanwhile, he was sitting there fixing fundamental flaws in less than a week once given the opportunity. You can't call that development. You can't call that strategy. You call that what it is, a mistake. Tucker's whole point is that coaching isn't just about scheming. It's about recognition, seeing potential early, trusting it, nurturing it, not burying it behind veterans who don't move the needle, not shelving it in the name of caution. Because what we're seeing now, this version of Shedeur Sanders, the one who looks unshakable and ready, is not the result of a perfectly executed plan. It's the result of a player who stayed locked in despite being ignored, and who sees his chance when the system finally failed itself. If anything, this is a story about resilience, but not the kind that makes for warm and fuzzy post-game quotes. This is the kind of resilience that's born from frustration, from being overlooked, from watching lesser players get reps you know you've earned. And still, Sanders waited. He worked. He fixed his game on his own time. And when they finally gave him the keys, he drove. Now, the Browns have no choice but to catch up. They're scrambling to build an offense around a player they didn't plan for. They're adjusting on the fly to a quarterback who's suddenly ahead of schedule, despite their slow start, not because of it. And Tucker isn't giving them a pass, nor should he, because the reality is they had 6 months to get this right. They had training camp, preseason, early season practices. They had every opportunity to give Shedeur meaningful time with the starters. Every chance to at least explore the idea that he might be ready sooner than expected. Instead, they defaulted to old habits, conservative decisions, vanilla depth charts. And the result? Wasted reps, missed opportunities. A delayed launch for a quarterback who might have already changed the trajectory of their season if they believed in him sooner. It's not just about one player. It's about process, vision, philosophy. Ross Tucker didn't just critique a decision. He exposed a flaw in how the Browns evaluate and develop talent. He made it clear. If your staff can help a quarterback overcome his biggest weakness in a week, your excuse for waiting half a year loses all credibility. That's the part that should sting for Browns fans. Because this isn't just another name on the jersey. This is a guy who could finally be the guy, and yet the team almost let him rot on the bench while chasing short-term patches. You don't get many chances at a franchise quarterback. When you find one, you build around him. Immediately. Not when you're desperate. Not when everything else falls apart. From the moment you see the spark, you fan it into a flame, but the Browns didn't. And Shedeur still delivered. Now they're playing from behind, not just on the scoreboard, but in the overall arc of his development. Because all those things that should have been happening since August, they're just starting now. Chemistry with receivers, timing with the line, full-speed game reps, reading defenses at NFL speed. He's doing it all, but he's doing it late. And not because he wasn't ready, but because no one gave him the chance to prove it. Ross Tucker is loud for a reason. He knows how rare it is to find a young quarterback with the poise, athleticism, and leadership Shedeur's already showing. And when a coaching staff fails to act on that, not because the player wasn't ready, but because they weren't, that deserves to be called out. Loudly. The Browns can still get this right. There's time. If Sanders keeps growing, keeps winning, keeps elevating the guys around him, this season could become something special. But let's not rewrite history. Let's not pretend this was all part of some master plan. It wasn't. This was a correction, a pivot, a panic move that just happened to reveal the best thing that's happened to this team in years. Now they have no excuse. No more hedging. No more splitting reps. No more development silos. Sanders is the guy. The Browns just need to act like it. The truth is, Shedeur Sanders saved the Browns and their own coaching staff, and nobody's saying it more directly than Ross Tucker. When a rookie quarterback steps onto the field for his first NFL start and looks more composed than veterans who've had the job for years, that's not luck. That's not a fluke. That's raw preparation, mental toughness, and a ceiling that's barely been touched. But it also forces you to ask, what exactly was this coaching staff watching for the last 6 months? Because Tucker's entire rant boils down to this uncomfortable truth. They had the guy and didn't even know it. Or worse, they knew and didn't care. That's the kind of miscalculation that sets franchises back, not just in wins and losses, but in wasted development cycles, in squandered momentum, in breaking trust with a player who gave you every reason to believe in him and still got put on the shelf. Let's be real. Quarterback development isn't a mystery. Every rep matters. Every install, every drill, every 7-on-7 snap build a foundation. You can't catch up later. It's not something you fast forward through like a highlight reel. But that's what the Browns are now trying to do. Speed run a process they ignored for half the season. And all because they misjudged the very player who now looks like their future. Ross Tucker is right to be outraged. Because of Shedeur's biggest flaw, his tendency to panic and bail from the pocket, was correctable in 7 days, then what exactly were they doing with him the rest of the time? Were they not watching the same practices? Did they not see the work ethic? The film study? The leadership? What makes this worse is that it's not just some fringe analyst tossing around blame. Tucker's been in locker rooms. He knows how coaching staffs evaluate players. He knows how quickly narratives form and how hard they are to break once they're set. And the narrative around Shedeur Sanders for 6 months was clearly that he wasn't ready, that he needed time, that it was safer to go with someone else. Not because the tape said so, but because it fit the blueprint of what coaches think development should look like. But development doesn't come from sitting and waiting. It comes from doing. Shedeur was ready to do, and the Browns refused to let him. That's the disconnect that Ross Tucker is drilling into. The kind that frustrates fans and former players alike. When a team says it wants to win, says it wants to build something sustainable, and then makes the most passive decision possible at the most important position on the field. It's one thing if the starter is thriving, but that wasn't the case in Cleveland. The quarterback play was shaky. The offense was stagnant. The door wasn't just cracked open, it was wide open. And still, Sanders was left standing outside, until Stefanski had no choice. Until the game plan had collapsed and the other options dried up. Only then did Shedeur get a shot. And when he got it, he looked like a leader, like a problem solver, like a quarterback with enough control to command a huddle and enough talent to back it up. That's not normal for a rookie, especially not one who's been buried on the depth chart and excluded from game planning conversations for months. The fact that he was that good with that little support, that's the story. That's the part Ross Tucker refuses to let slide. Because now the Browns are trying to rewrite the narrative. They're walking into press conferences, talking about how proud they are of Shedeur, how he's progressing so well, how he's earned this opportunity. But the truth is, they didn't give him this opportunity. He took it. They didn't set him up to succeed. He worked through the setbacks, stayed ready, and turned his one shot into something bigger than any of them expected. That's what makes this such a dramatic shift, not just in the season, but in the trajectory of the franchise. Because if Shedeur Sanders continues to develop, if he keeps winning, if he keeps improving, if he keeps showing this level of mental toughness, then the Browns' mistake will only grow louder in hindsight. People will look back and ask how many wins they could have had if he'd started sooner. How many games might have turned out differently. How far along he'd be right now with even 2 months of proper first-team integration. But you don't get to rewind. All you can do now is acknowledge the mistake and fix it going forward. And that's where the spotlight stays. On the Browns coaching staff, on Stefanski, on the quarterback coaches, on the offensive coordinators, because they all missed it. They all chose a safer route, and it blew up in their... And sure, they're lucky Shedeur is built the way he is. Because if he had been the kind of player who needed to be coddled, who lost confidence after being benched, who didn't keep pushing through the neglect, this story would look very different. Instead, they got a quarterback with poise, leadership, and vision. A guy who didn't need ideal conditions, just a chance. And Ross Tucker is making sure they don't get to pat themselves on the back for it. Because you don't get credit for stumbling into success after ignoring every sign pointing toward it. You don't get applause for starting the right quarterback after you've exhausted all the wrong ones. You just get lucky that he didn't give up on you. The most unforgivable part of this is that Shedeur's mental maturity was obvious. Tucker called it out. He didn't just praise the arm strength or the pocket footwork. He praised the mind, the ability to show up to a high-pressure moment with minimal prep and play like it was just another Saturday afternoon. That's the kind of stuff teams dream of in a quarterback. And the Browns had it in their building for 6 months, untapped. This isn't a victory lap. This is a warning shot. Because if the Browns don't learn from this, if they go right back to old habits the next time a young quarterback walks into camp, then it's only a matter of time before they waste someone else's career the same way. Right now, Shedeur's talent is dragging the Browns out of their own mess. But that window won't stay open forever. They've got to pivot, build, invest, create a structure that actually prioritizes quarterback development instead of pretending to. Ross Tucker did what good analysts are supposed to do. He told the truth, even when it's inconvenient. And that truth is clear. The Browns didn't believe in Shedeur Sanders until it was almost too late. Now it's on them to prove they've finally seen the light. What do you think? Was this the wake-up call the Browns needed? Or is it just another example of too little, too late? Sound off in the comments. Like this if you've been waiting for Sanders to get a shot all season. And share this video with someone who still thinks benching your best talent is development. Hit that subscribe button for more breakdowns, more drama, and more receipts. Because stories like this, we're just getting